Hey guys, Exotic Gaming here. Today we'll be talking about 10 mobile games you can't play anymore. Whether these games were shut down because they're too old or the developers were just completely out of touch with the player base, these games are probably never coming back. To give you a heads up, I like to focus on shooting games a lot on this channel, so many of them will be in that category. But I hope you guys do enjoy. Leave a like if you do, subscribe, and comment down below a couple of games that you miss playing. You know, games that you can't play anymore, but you just wish you could jump back into one last time. Thanks guys, and let's jump into the video. The first game we need to talk about is Rules of Survival, one of the most iconic mobile games of all time, and probably one of the first that comes to mind when you think of a big game that you can't play anymore. Rules of Survival made a name for itself back in 2017 before PUBG Mobile released. It was essentially PUBG Mobile before PUBG Mobile was ever even a thing. And it was very impressive. Other than a few indie games here and there, we really didn't have a full, proper, stable battle royale experience with 100+ players for mobile devices, and certainly not one made by a big publisher like NetEase. Rules of Survival amassed over 200 million players within the first year of release, and gameplay was fast-paced in solos, duos, or squads, with a ton of different weapons, vehicles, skins, and maps to choose from. They even added a creative mode where you could make your own maps, and it pretty much encapsulated everything. The game inevitably started to decline as it got older and older and more outdated, and NetEase made one last-ditch effort to try and revive it with Rules of Survival 2.0, similar to Metro Royale in PUBG Mobile, but it just didn't stick. The game was eventually shut down in 2022, 2 years ago, and they have no plans of ever bringing it back. Despite this, it still was one of the most successful mobile games of all time. Next up, we have to mention Payday Crime War. This is probably one of the newest games on this list, and it really just had so many faults, it's ridiculous. This game probably would have done pretty well if it released back in like 2016, for instance, but it came out so many years late with outdated graphics and gameplay mechanics. It just wasn't a great experience overall. Payday Crime War had been in development for a long time, with numerous delays and setbacks, and was supposed to be the proper successor to the previous Payday games, Payday 1 and Payday 2, but it just didn't play out that way. The whole thing with this game is you could play as either a heister or law enforcement. There would be these 4v4 battles where the 4 heisters would try and rob a bank and escape, while the law enforcement would try to protect the base and eliminate the heisters. It's actually a very cool concept, but the biggest problem with this game is it just felt so old immediately upon release. You know, you have games like Delta Force Mobile and Arena Breakout come out, and they actually feel like next-gen games. I don't think anybody's denying that, but Payday Crime War, it just didn't. It didn't even feel like a game from the last generation. It felt like a game from multiple generations ago. You know, on par with a game like Modern Combat 4, for instance. The devs gave up shortly after release, and it got shut down in October of 2023. The third game worth mentioning is Project Rush V. I really wish this game wasn't on this list, man, because it had so much potential. This game was developed by the same team behind Battle Prime, and think of this game as a unique blend of Battle Prime and Valorant Mobile. I don't really understand what happened with this game, and who knows, it might come back in the future, but I just don't think that's gonna happen at this point in time. This was a 5v5 team-based hero shooter where you had your attackers and your defenders. Attackers would try to plant the bomb, and defenders would prevent them from doing so. It was very competitive, had great controls, and had awesome graphics comparable to Battle Prime. Each hero had unique abilities that could change the whole battle. Players had many different weapons to choose from, customizable outfits, and the whole game was very team-oriented. I personally thought the game would do very well, so I was very surprised when the last time we heard from the developers was back in 2022, 2 years ago. Maybe they had funding issues or priorities switched back to the original game, Battle Prime, but nonetheless, it was still fun for the short while that it lasted. If by chance this game has not been canceled and it's just been delayed, I would love if the developers could reach out to me and let me know. I'd love to let people know, and I think many people would be very excited to hear any update from this game. This game still has a ton of potential. Fourth on our list is a game you all saw coming, Apex Legends Mobile. The original game was released globally back on May 17th, 2022, and it had a massive response. Everybody was excited to play the real Apex Legends on mobile devices, and it honestly had some of the best graphics of any mobile game of its time. This was truly a next-generation mobile battle royale game, and it had everything going for it: a loyal player base, unique mobile exclusive legends, and it was even pretty optimized for some of the lower end devices. The biggest issue though was the big lack of communication between the developers and the player base. The game did not meet the high quality standard that Respawn was known for. Updates were released that really didn't fit well with the game, and while the game engaged core players and attracted new players initially, it struggled to retain casual players at the rate necessary to make a game sustainable. The mobile gaming market was already highly competitive, and as a development team, if you can't hone in on exactly what your audience wants, you are going to fail. EA was just not doing well in the mobile gaming space at this point in time, and the game was sunset on May 1st, 2023. It had so much potential, but it really just missed the mark, and that's honestly so unfortunate in my personal opinion. This one really hurts. Another game that completely missed the mark was Battlefield Mobile. Another EA game that just totally failed at what it was trying to originally do. Kinda like Payday Crime War, this game was just so far behind on the times. If it had been released in like 2015, it would have been really good. But it didn't. It was being developed in like 2021 and 2022 when we had games that looked way better that were already older than this one, like Call of Duty Mobile for instance, which still looks good in 2024, and Recon. And the game had destructible environments similar to other past Battlefield games. But that was really it, dude. That's all it had going for it. The graphics were really bad, even on the highest end devices, and gameplay was just so bad and clunky, it really was not that good. And it's not even like this was a super early version and it was gonna get way better over time. They had updates for a whole year, and the game didn't even look any better a year later after the first updates. I didn't like it, it was a complete fail, and it got officially canceled in January of 2023. EA even shut down the studio that was making this game, Industrial Toys, so they really didn't like the direction this game was going. If this game had gone in the direction of a game like Battlefield 4 for mobile devices, it would have done a lot better, but alas, this is yet again another game that completely missed the mark. The sixth game we should take a look at is Rogue Company Elite. Another game I really wish would have been more successful. Rogue Company Elite was supposed to be the mobile version of the game Rogue Company by Hi-Rez Studios. The original game was a third-person shooter with a variety of different game modes, including Extraction, Strikeout, Demolition, and Wingman, and it has 26 unique rogues, each with their own set of skills, weapons, and gadgets. It is a cross-platform and cross-progression game, and teamwork is emphasized heavily. Rogue Company Elite had everything going for it. It had really smooth gameplay on par with any of the best games, great graphics, and overall not much wrong with it. But I think the biggest issue this game faced is it just wasn't unique enough to the point where people would switch from the games that they have dedicated so much time and effort to and abandoning those other games. Like, we already had numerous hero-based shooters, both first person and third person, and we already had plenty of games with the classic Demolition, Team Deathmatch, and other game modes, and Rogue Company as a whole just wasn't doing too well in its entirety. It still isn't. The game is on a massive decline, and I think the devs just realized this mobile version wouldn't be too successful, and they just decided to stop development before they wasted any more money. Not too long ago, this game was gone for good. The seventh game you can't play anymore is a game that you might have never heard of before. The only reason you would have heard anything about this game is if you watched some of my past videos. This is a game called Project X-22, and it had a ton of potential. More than a lot of the games on this list, to be completely honest with you. This first-person shooter was a weird blend of Apex Legends Mobile, Call of Duty Mobile, Valorant Mobile, PUBG Mobile, and a few other games. Imagine a game that combines the shrinking zone of a battle royale, but you also need to get points by killing players like you would do in a team deathmatch game. There are various zones, like Point A and Point B, like in Valorant Mobile or in Call of Duty Domination Mode. And you have like 3 or 4 squads competing to be the #1 position. It's crazy, and this game did a lot of neat things that other games didn't do. For instance, I think you could respawn at least once, but eventually you can't respawn anymore, and then you would turn into a ghost. You could then travel around the map and then spot enemies for your teammates. It's really weird, and unfortunately this game only had servers up for a very short period of time before the developers, MobiJoy, shut down the game forever. Considering how unique it was, I think a ton of the people that are watching this very video would have really enjoyed it, but I guess the developers never really saw that, and it never got past testing. 8th on our list is Critical Ops Reloaded. This one probably hurts for a lot of you guys. This was supposed to be essentially the sequel to Critical Ops, one of the most popular CSGO mobile games for both iOS and Android devices. Critical Ops was one of the biggest FPS games back in the day, and since that game was getting pretty old, it made sense to make an improved version of the original. This game was supposed to have improved graphics, new maps, new modes, and in-game voice chat. However, unfortunately, after launch, this game quickly faced a whole bunch of different problems, such as being region-locked to only a few different Asian countries, a different monetization system from the original Critical Ops, which made the game more pay-to-win, and an unstable player experience, which even caused some players to lose their progress, items, or ranks, and a different faster-paced arcadey playstyle compared to the original Critical Ops. This game just never felt the same compared to the original, and the developers realized pretty quickly, so they shut down the game on September 20th, 2020, leaving the original game behind, which you can still play. I do think Critical Ops does need a revamp in order to compete with some of the newer titles that we have nowadays, since it is a really old game at this point in time, but Critical Ops Reloaded just wasn't the way to go. Maybe they'll try and redo it in the future and make it much better. Second to last on this list is a game called Final Fantasy VII: The First Soldier. This game lasted less time than almost any other big AAA game that I had ever seen before. It was a complete fail. This was a free-to-play multiplayer battle royale game released on November 17th, 2021, published by the company Square Enix, and was part of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, a collection of spin-off games related to the original Final Fantasy VII released in 1997. It was a really unique battle royale game in that it combined elements from the original Final Fantasy VII, such as the same characters, rideable monsters, magic, enemies, and more. You could customize your character and choose a unique battle style that'll help you gain a certain edge in battle. It had a lot of different game modes, including ranked, blitz mode, seasonal events, and more, but the game just didn't meet the demands and expectations of players. It had kinda clunky gameplay mechanics, low player retention, poor management, lack of updates, and a lot more issues, and because of that, it shut down a little over a year after release in January 2023. It really could have been great, and had this game been made differently, it could have easily been one of the biggest mobile battle royale games ever. It had a lot going for it, but it just wasn't enough. And finally, the last mobile game that you can't play anymore is a game called Mission Evo. This was yet another game that had a ton of potential, but just didn't realize that potential. It was supposed to be yet another one of the many open world survival games, plethora of different weapons and gear that you could build, and a world with unique graphics and sceneries that you didn't see in other games. Unfortunately, for some reason, the developers just kinda gave up on this game, and in December 2023, they announced that they would be shutting down the open beta test, and that was it. Servers were shut down, and you could no longer play the game. Now, supposedly, from what I've heard, the game might be coming back specifically to China under a new name called Spark Return to Amber, but I'm not 100% sure about it, and I wouldn't really be that surprised if this game never materialized. I guess there are just too many mobile survival games at this point in time, and I guess if you don't differentiate your game enough to the point where it's worth playing, you will not succeed, even if your game is still pretty good. That's what happened with Mission Evo. It still was a pretty good game, but it just wasn't different enough to the point where it actually would do well. And hey, with that being said, that pretty much wraps up everything. I don't want you guys to be all sad and disappointed that you can't play these games anymore. Most of the games weren't even that good, and for the games that actually were, you might still be able to play a different version, like Critical Ops, for instance, or there are simply better games that are playable now. Like Rules of Survival? Yeah, it's sad that that game is no longer playable, but it was good back in like 2017 to 2020, and in 2024, if you played it now, you probably wouldn't think the same. Nowadays, there are way better games that you can play, even on the lowest end of devices. Let me know what you guys thought about these games, though. Did you play all of them, or did you miss out on a majority of them? I'd love to know down below in the comments. And comment down below which games you missed the most, as I said at the beginning of the video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more mobile gaming content just like this, and I will see you all in the next episode.